Record. Okay. So my name is Shannon Polly. I live in fabulous Washington, D.C. We have beautiful weather today, and I'm thrilled to have you all with me. So I want to jump in and tell you a little story. Any of you who know me know that I also teach executive presence and presentation skills, and so for me, it's all about starting with stories. Well, I had the honor of getting to work with the U.S. Army. Now, sometimes when I do work with organizations, I say, take a guess as to which group you think is the #1 consumer of positive psychology in the world today. They never guess the US Army, believe it or not, but it is. And one of the most meaningful moments of being a tiny, tiny part of the training team, I didn't design the workshop, but I was part of the training team, was having this sergeant come up to me at the end of the workshop at 8 days, because it's the Army, so you can sequester people for that long. And he shook my hand and he said, "This training is saving lives, which is more important than taking them." And I was just floored by that. I didn't know what to say. And then I realized that, I've been studying this, working on it for 10 years. Sometimes I forget the impact that these things can have. And while it might not be that level of impact for you or your people, it still can have a huge, huge impact. So I want to make sure first that I get the participants that are waiting. Okay, I know some people are listening to the recording, so we'll dive in. All right, so I want to start with you, and then I want to look at how we can help you as a large group and as large teams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the science, a little bit about the research, just touch on it, and give you a tool for you to work individually to manage change, because really change starts with us as individuals. And then I want to share with you some really exciting research around the area of global change or appreciative inquiry, which is a way that you can use change on a large scale. So if you are a change practitioner, we're going to have some new stuff for you. If you're just dipping into it, this is a good thing as well. So we're going to dig into the science. I had one client who said, I just tell people that change shouldn't be hard. It's not hard. It'll be fine, which is really kind of denying your emotion, which is actually not good. It plays into the whole theory that positive psychology is happyology, which is not. So I think it's okay to admit that change is hard. And part of the reason that change is hard is that our brain registers change as physical pain. So our prefrontal cortex, our working memory, can only take in about 7 bits of information before it has to move it to the back like a filing cabinet. And if you don't move it to the back, all those papers are just strewn all over your desk. And it actually, our brain registers these bursts of light when there's change, and it overwhelms us. So it's pretty normal for that to happen. And the question is not, is it pain or is that a good thing, but how do you manage it? So one of the ways to manage it is how you focus. And focusing on the power of where you focus is really about your attention. So whether that's easy for you or whether that's challenging for you, it's thinking about strategies for how you can focus. So I want to do a little experiment. I want this to be interactive, even if you are eating your lunch today. So I want you to imagine that you are the person in red. You can pop into the chat panel if you happen to be a mountain biker or even a golfer or a baseball player, similar principle, but let's imagine you're the person in the red and you can choose your thoughts. So your thoughts are either A, don't go here, I might die, or your thought is B, aim here. So I want you to think about what your thoughts, what would be the most effective thought for you to have. Just think about that, jot down a note next to you. Now, when I do this for accountants, almost all of them say, avoid this area, don't go here. And to be fair, there are some professions where it's good to focus on the negative. I want my airline pilot to look for what could go wrong. I don't want them to say, oh, it's fine, I'm sure it'll be okay, we'll manage it, that little beeping noise, it'll be fine. But for us as, people, workers and employees, if you're always focusing on what's not working, then that leads to lower levels of well-being and is also not as effective. So you really want to focus where you want to go. Sports people know this. If you're a golfer, you want to envision where the ball goes. And same thing is true here. We call it an approach goal as opposed to an avoidance goal. So what does this have to do with change? Well, it helps you overcome that overwhelm in the brain, but it also helps you think about emotions. So I know I did actually have a client yesterday who said, well, I just don't have emotions at work. I just check them at the door and I let them go. Well, I was like, really interesting. How's that working for you? um, I don't think you can check your emotions at the door. I think you can repress them. Probably not the most helpful. So I want to do an experiment right now. I am going to show you a series of anagrams. Anagrams, scrambled up words. I want you to pull out a piece of paper. I want you to pull out a pen. And before I do this, I want to make sure I don't have any questions in the chat panel so that, oh, I do have a few comments. Did I intend to be showing slides? You're only seeing me. That's not good. Okay, good thing I checked. So, Sandy, maybe you can pop on and see if I am sharing. I want to make sure I'm sharing my screen. Now can you see my slides? Okay. I love technology. All right, so this was the picture of the mountain bikers, and that was the avoid this area or aim here. So thank you for those of you who are in the chat panel helping me out with that. Technology, not my top strength. All right, so I'm gonna play from this current slide, and I do want to have you jot down these anagrams, okay? And we'll see how you do.
This is Martin here.
Hi, Martin. We're doing some anagrams. So that's what's on the screen. And if you can solve them, jot them down on a piece of paper and then we'll...
So what am I going to solve?
We're going to solve these anagrams that are rolling up here.
Oh, okay.
Good to see you. Okay, so there we are. If you were able to solve some of the anagrams, just jot down in the chat panel how many of them, don't tell us what they were, jot down how many of the anagrams you were able to solve. What I'm more interested in, rather than how many you were able to solve, was what you were saying to yourself as they were going along. So if you want to jot that down in the chat panel as well, that I think is more interesting. We call those the ticker tape thoughts that were going through your mind. What did you say to yourself? How did you feel as they came and went? Did your emotions change from the beginning to the end? And were you able to stay focused? Did you stop and check your email in the middle? Did you go run an errand and come back? So there were, in fact, only 2 that were actually words that you could solve. So a little bit of a trick there. The 2 words were optimism and happier. So what I see in the chat panel is that some of the thoughts were, it's hard, they're too jumbled, is she tricking us? I can't solve these, stay focused. So a lot of mix of different thoughts while we were doing that. What's interesting is that they did this research. Kyle was trying to write them down so he could solve them later. Nice, I like that. I like the achieving. Only 2/3 of Penn students were able to complete a simple crossword puzzle after trying this exercise. So this exercise was meant to be difficult and challenging. And what it shows is that sometimes our thoughts then keep us from being able to do something in the future that should be easy enough to do. Now, when I was sharing this, a little bit of research about emotions with the crowd in Atlanta, and I said that emotions were a matter of choice, there was a guy in the room who piped up and said, "Tell that to my wife." The whole room burst out laughing. But in reality, your emotions are a matter of choice. You have leverage. So let's see if you know where you have leverage. This is from Beck and Ellis, the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy. And you may have an adversity, or as we call it, an activating event. There are your thoughts or your beliefs about the event. So some of those ticker tape thoughts that you were just having with the anagrams, does it mean anything? I need to stay focused. These are hard. And then there are the emotions that may be frustration, annoyance, hope or giving up. And then there's the actions. Maybe I went to check, another slide. Maybe I went to print out something. So here's the question. Where do you have leverage in this circle, this loop? Just type it in the chat panel if you know. Where do you have leverage? Your actions. Okay. That is one place you have leverage. What's another place you have leverage? Your beliefs or your thoughts. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Martin. Right, cognitive behavioral therapy. We have leverage on the beliefs. That is the pivotal point. And when we shared this with the Army sergeants, they were really stunned. They were like, sometimes our thoughts happen so quickly, it's easier to go in at the consequences. So if you are a practitioner and you're teaching this to others, I'll flip it. Sometimes I'll go from the emotions first. What were your emotions? And then to the thoughts, because sometimes they're happening so quickly, it's hard to track them. So the thoughts are really where you have leverage. And when we're going through change, you want to figure out how do I shift those thoughts? And what's funny is that, I did this training, I teach this a lot with my coaching clients, and every once in a while I'll be like, I should probably try this out. And I'll sit and put one of my activating events in there, and invariably it'll have a thought. I'll be like, wow, I didn't even know I was thinking that. So it's one of those things that gets deeper and deeper the more you practice it until it becomes a bit automatic. So I want to share an example from one of my clients, a coaching client that I had this week. And the activating event, his adversity was that he lost someone on his sales team. Tragically, this person died, but I softened it a little bit for this exercise. So there's some layers for the activating event for him. It was pretty severe. But the emotions, he was feeling frustrated, he was feeling anxious, a little bit hopeless because he had to now take over this territory. He's already overwhelmed. One of the things he did, which is his sort of go-to, which doesn't work very well for him, is that he called his own CEO to just vent. He had to talk to somebody. He didn't go to the gym. He lost his temper with his wife. So in going back to try to track his thoughts, now, if you're working on this with clients, sometimes they'll clean it up for you. And I urge you to have them not clean it up. If they try to clean it up, it's hard to argue back against the thoughts, which we're going to do in a second. I always tell them, I worked with Army sergeants. I've heard any kind of language you've ever heard, you can't shock me. But basically, some of his thoughts were, I can't do this. Like, I'm supposed to be the manager. I'm supposed to be taking it all on. But he said, maybe I need to start a new job. Maybe I need to call the CEO. He's going to call the CEO and say, by the way, I'm giving you 18 months notice and I'm going to quit. And I was like, interesting. As a coach, I was like, let's look at that for a moment. But if I'm walking through this model with him, I said, okay, the D is where you play the lawyer. This is where you play the attorney against your thoughts and where you jump to the other side and say, how could you argue against you have to do it all? Do you really have to do it all? Is that true? As Tara Brach said, I love Tara Brach is a local meditation teacher here in the DC area, and I highly recommend her. She has some free podcasts. She says it's real, but not true. So a lot of times people think, it really feels real, but the truth is, he doesn't have to do it all. He chose, I can delegate some things. I could vent to my wife instead of my CEO, which really annoys the CEO. That the gym is actually an outlet for him. It actually helps increase his well-being, and that can help his mood. So the E could be energize or a new effect is that, he felt a little better. It was to say, slowing down, writing it down. James Pennebaker from UT Austin, I'm going to write his name in the chat panel because I really like his research. He talks about writing things down, regardless of whether it's negative or positive, actually helps increase your well-being because you're externalizing, you're seeing it, you're separate from your thoughts. So this is what I want you to do. This is why I want us to be interactive, not just me talking at you for an hour because that's boring. I want you to think about an activating event or an adversity in your own life. It could be small, like my alarm didn't go off and I was late for work, or it could be big. I got passed over for that promotion and I'm really frustrated about it. So the first one is just the facts of what happened. The beliefs are your thoughts in the moment. And like I said, you can go in either the B or the C. The D is where you're playing the lawyer. And then the E is a new effect. Now I want to give you some strategies for the D, especially if you want to use this with clients or if you want to use it for yourself. And these are some ways that you can dispute. And usually people have a go-to. Karen Rivich designed the research for the Army, and evidence was always her go-to. The evidence for and against the beliefs. Another way to look at it is there another way to look at this? What would your best friend say? What would a colleague who thinks differently than you say? Then the third is, okay, let's go down this dark path. What if your explanation is right? What if, my client does have to do it all and he can't, delegate anything? Is that the end of the world? Will you survive? Are you going to have a mental breakdown? Let's go down that path. And then the final one is it really worth it? Is it useful to think about this right now? I remember the story about Michael Jordan, who when he lost a basketball game, he had a rubber band on his wrist and he would just snap it and he would give himself 10 minutes to ruminate about losing the game, snap the rubber band, and that was his cue. 10 minutes is all you got. So I want to give you just 2 or 3 minutes to jot down this for yourself. And if you're familiar with this and you have ideas about it, ways you use it, while we're doing this, you can pop them in the chat panel. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat panel. but I want to give you 2 or 3 minutes to work through something for yourself, and then we'll come back and see what thoughts you have about it. So, setting my handy timer, and we'll see you back in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, we've got about 1 minute left. Okay, I'm going to bring us back. That's not quite enough time to do this in depth, but I'd love to know some of your examples. All right, so thank you, Martin, for sharing. Dropped by our main client without them letting us know or thanking us for 15 years of success. Wow, that is shocking. The beliefs or the ticker tape thoughts, and this is where we got into a bit of a debate when we were using with the Army. When we said the word belief, they thought of it as something like a core belief, like a religious belief. So if your clients are thinking, if they get hung up on the word belief, feel free to use the word thought. Okay, so Martin, for the consequence, the thought is it's my fault. The consequence would be, now the consequence of losing your client is definitely losing revenue, but I'm talking about the consequence of your emotion or your reaction to this. Did you stay in bed for a day? Did you write them a nasty email? Did you feel angry, frustrated, punch a wall? So maybe it's really the consequence to the belief. The disputing, that's a good one, Martin, of the I had to change. The disputing could be how do you dispute it's your fault? Like, is it true? How do you know it's true? What evidence do you have that it's your fault? Maybe their budget changed. This is where you play the attorney and you say, maybe their budget changed. Maybe someone got fired and they decided to move to a new vendor that was their best friend. This is how you argue against it. Here's another good, the E, new effect, a period of change, writing, marketing, emphasis, turning it around. I love that. So Martin, again, that is a great effect. That's more of an effect of the adversity as opposed to you arguing back against the thoughts. So the new effect is, I love, this is a good start of like focusing on the positive. And I always say to clients, when we get to the E, it's not like you're going to erase all the thoughts of being annoyed that you overate last night, Sandy. I can join you on that activating event and had a little too much wine. But do you feel slightly better? Does it lessen the guilt or the ruminations a little bit on the E challenge? Now, great point, Andrew. Good question. What if it is your fault? It could be. So when you're and I love that you asked that. When you're disputing the beliefs in B, some of them could be true. There could be grains of truth. Maybe you did make a mistake in that last presentation. And is there a chink in the armor? So usually I'm looking for the difference between the black and white of it's all my fault or it's not my fault at all. It's not saying that you shouldn't take responsibility. So great point. Then the question is, okay, so what's the nuance of it? I actually wrote an email to pitch a client, and I used the wrong name for the CEO. I called him Bob instead of Bill. And I was like, oh my God, that was a big mistake. I probably should read my email again and get the guy's name right. So if it is your fault, what are the steps you can take to move forward? A customer walked out of an executive briefing because they got hung up on a technical capability and ended the meeting. That's quite an activating event. So the question is, what were your thoughts about it? Is it about the technical capability? Is it like it's my fault? Is it this is terrible, they ended the meeting, we're never going to get this a customer back? What are those ticker tape thoughts? And then the emotion, did it cause anxiety? Did it cause sadness? Did it cause anger? And maybe sometimes it's just, as you said, they want to do it a different way, the wrong way. Maybe it's the client. So that could be a D of like, well, they want to try to do it a different way and it's not going to work. There's a great video online. I'll see if I can find the link to it. And it's a very funny video about technical people and what it translates to. And it was a great highlight to me, and not as a technical person, but someone who works with technical people. And it was like the technical expert in the room. And then the other person was like, so we'd like you to draw 8 straight lines that are red and black and blue and green, but only use a black pen. And the person was like, I can't do that. It's not possible. And they're like, but you're the expert. So I'll see if I can share the funny video for you to use with your clients. I like the huddle internally, coming up with a connection. We're speaking today. That's a good win. So thank you for sharing those. Change happens, we have to manage it internally. And this is a tool to manage it internally. And I wanted to share a little story about a client I worked with at a tech company. And I coached her. She was really high performing. 18 months later, I started to meet with her again. And she was like, devolved into this ruminating, angry person I barely recognized. And we went through it, and she's like, my boss took my main job away from me, and this is unacceptable. I'm really high performing, and I'm the breadwinner, and I have to be the breadwinner. And, she went through this whole litany of things. And I said, so what do you want? And she said, revenge. I was like, okay, what else do you want? And we went through a couple of months of more coaching, and we did the ABCDE, and she sort of had insights about her thoughts that she had to make the choice. She said, I just have to let happy back in. And I was like, tell me more about that. She's like, well, I realized that I'm focusing on what's not working, and I can choose a new job. She applied for 2 new jobs at the company, 1 new job outside the company. After a couple of months, she got a job inside the company. They're using her strength. She's really happy. And at the end of that session, I was like, that's funny. It should be a mug. And she was like, And then 2 months later, I get this mug in the mail for my client, which was really, really kind. So that just highlights that change is a choice. And that place you have leverage are those thoughts and those beliefs. So the benefit of this, well, they showed some recent research about cognitive behavioral therapy is that people who did 3 sessions for 45 minutes only, so that's really like just a little over 2 hours, it reduced depression and anxiety and increased self-esteem and hope. It also disputes leads to greater well-being. So that's sort of a more general example from some a little older research. The research I'm quoting is a little more recent. So I love that as a tool for an individual. If you're looking at large groups or managing change, the AI, the unfortunate acronym for appreciative inquiry, if you're working in technology, appreciative inquiry is a tool that works on a large scale that always works if you have a few success factors in place. And there's some new research that I want to share with you about this. But one of the principles is that it focuses on strengths. Now, anybody know who this is? You can write in the chat panel. I live in Washington, D.C., so these are our Washington Nationals who won the World Series. And I don't see no takers. So I recently went to, yes, thank you, Emily, Juan Soto. He's a Dominican player who was on our the World Series team. I actually went to the Dominican Republic with my hubby recently, and I speak a little Spanish and my husband doesn't speak any Spanish. And so everyone, all the wait staff were like, Nationals, Washington, World Series, Soto, you know, they were so excited. So one of the things they did, if you didn't, I'm not a big baseball fan to be honest, but it took them 7 games. They lost all the games at home, so it was really depressing to watch. They won all their games away, but the thing is they never quit. They always kept focusing on what people are good at and just focusing on the one more thing. And if you listen to their interviews afterwards, they talked about, they were like, we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing. And they shifted their thoughts to focus on what are their strengths. Their strengths were working as a team. And if any of other of you are annoyed by the Baby Shark song, I really feel like the person who came out to the Baby Shark song, it increased positive emotion on the team and bonded them as a team. So I had to give a shout out to my Washington Nationals. Focusing on your strengths, a lot of research on strengths. I can send you a ton of stuff afterwards. It improves performance at work, and it's like an easy concept to appreciate, but hard to do. So people, our bias is to focus on what's working. Now, when you focus on strengths, your people are less likely to quit, which saves you money, you're more productive. Even customers notice it when you focus on your strengths. Now, I love implementing a larger strength strategy, focusing on the entire organization. And it's something called appreciative inquiry, which has been around since the 80s. Not everybody has heard of it. It's been used with all of these companies. The green and blue circle in the middle was one that I was part of for the entire city of Cleveland. 800 people for 3 days. Kofi Annan, the Dalai Lama. It's one of those things where you're like, if it can work for the Dalai Lama, it can probably work for your organization. But I want to share some of the new research around appreciative inquiry, why it works. So the old model, and this is from Michelle McQuaid's Change Lab, so we'll give her some shout out, and Dr. Peggy Kern for their research. The old model of change is command and control, top down. I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to implement it. The new model of change is how do you invite and how do you ask questions about what is most successful. Now, appreciative inquiry has so many success factors. This new research focuses on how do you create change and how do you support well-being at the same time, which I think is really, let me bounce back to that. What I think is the most fascinating is that it focuses on purpose, organizational purpose. It's, you know, when you have a strong purpose, people are motivated. It's led by being inclusive, having meaningful conversations, and letting people self-organize. So if people can participate in it, they're more likely to implement it. So I want to share an example from Unilever. So Unilever CEO was interviewed by David Cooperrider recently, and they turned their workplace around by focusing on educating kids under age 5 with how to wash their hands. I mean, they create so many products around the world. 1 in 3 people have touched a Unilever product. So this CEO has been implementing these change in sustainability practices for the last 10 years. They started teaching farmers around the world sustainability practices. They increased their market cap by like $400 million in a year. And he's been awarded a prize by the UN. So Unilever is an amazing success story of how to implement these changes by focusing on asking questions and inviting, and not just saying, I'm the CEO. So I wanted to make the appreciative inquiry process a little more practical for you because you may have the budget to implement a full-scale AI, and if you do, I would suggest you ask a few questions. 1, see, is the organization ready for change? So the research shows you don't want it to be really dysfunctional and you don't want it to be consistently thriving. You want it to be somewhere in the middle. So if it's really dysfunctional, people are going to be self-protective. And if it's already thriving, then they might say, well, why do we need this? The second question you should ask is, do you have the courage to be generative? So being strengths-based is important, but it's only going to get you so far. Being able to see new ways in the old is the real key to transformation. And the third is, can you support self-organization? So the reason why the Cleveland Summit worked was that they had systems in place to support the 26 design teams that came out of that 3-day summit. And Michelle McQuaid, if you go to michellемcquaid.com/the-change-lab, she has some of these questions on there. And questions are the key. So Peter Drucker, one of my faves, he says the most common source of mistakes is trying to find the right answer as opposed to what's the right question. What questions are you asking? So I want to give you some actual questions in addition to those ones that I said previously about, checking for change. So instead of, what's the biggest problem, which I find a lot in organizations, what are the possibilities that we haven't even considered yet? Instead of why do we so often blow it? This is one of my favorite questions. What's the smallest change that would make the biggest impact? And instead of saying, all right, what keeps you up at night? That's often a common interview question among for CEOs. What about, I'm going to be most proud of fill in your organization here in 2022, 2023. So the real big idea is, what unconditionally positive questions can you ask right now? Because we're all hardwired with a negativity bias. We are hardwired to look for what's wrong. So if I ask my husband or my kids at the end of the day, how was your day? Well, that's a neutral question. And I'll usually go, well, this person was mean to me on the playground, or my husband, similarly, this person was mean to me. I once explained to my daughters what I did. They were like, what do you do for a living? I was like, well, I teach people to be happier and to be nicer to each other. My older daughter said, you're never going to be out of work, mommy. So unfortunately, I think that might be true, but I digress. But if I phrase the question as unconditionally positive of what was the best part of your day, what was what are you looking forward to today? That will get me the question I want. And as a leader, you want to figure out and be thoughtful about, how do you phrase those questions? What made you most successful in that last piece of work? When have you been successful in the past? That's called a solutions focused question. So I've been talking a lot. I guess that happens on a webinar. I'd love for you to jot down in the chat panel, and I'm gonna figure out how to unmute you, or you can unmute yourself if you want to talk aloud. What's an insight that you had? What is one thing you're gonna do differently when you're back at work in 10 or 15 minutes? We're not done just yet, so don't leave just yet. But I want to take any insights, something you're going to try, and any questions you have about the CBT tool. And yes, Ashima, for you, I would share the slides. If you're interested in sharing the slides, send me an email, and I'm going to put my email in the chat panel, and I will share them with you. Because one of the things that I love about both Appreciative Inquiry and the positive psychology sort of community is, well, Appreciative Inquiry is completely open space. Open source, I mean, they're open source. So you can go to the AI Commons and find out anything you want to know about Appreciative Inquiry. Past summits, people will share their workbooks. If you're interested, I'm happy to, explain some of that stuff. But also, I want the ABCDE tool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you found the tool and want to see how it can be effective. It's one of those things where once you start learning the ABCDE tool, you can start to stop yourself in the moment and do it. So when my kids are yelling at each other at the end of the day because they're tired and they're hungry, I'm like, okay, here's the thought of, I'm a bad parent. My kid's going to end up in jail because they're hitting each other. They must just be really violent creatures. And then I have to argue back against my thoughts to say, no, they're 21 months apart. This is normal. This is a normal thing to have happen. Okay, another insight. Connecting choice to happy. And we look at choice with a negativity bias too. That's so interesting, Ashima. So say more, if you can, about how you connect choice to the negativity bias.
Yeah, I can speak if that's okay.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what happens is, let's say if my husband is in the mode of switching his job, he knows he has choice to make, choice to stay, choice to change. But the negativity bias there is, well, if I change, if I leave, blah, blah, blah would go against me. If I go there, these might go against me, as opposed to connecting positive emotions and happiness into the choice. For example, if I switch, my commute will be short, I have more time, and maybe that time goes towards family or well-being, as opposed to, well, if I switch, I get, a higher title, less pay. So I think the focus is not always well-rounded, and the well-rounded focus should include positive emotions as well.
Yes. Thank you. That's so helpful. So I wrote something else in the chat panel. Dan Gilbert's TED Talk, Stumbling on Happiness, and his book, highly recommend. It talks about how we're not good at predicting our future happiness, which I think ties to what you were saying about the negativity bias. Because there's some research that the commute people have, for those of you living in the Bay Area, this is very pertinent. It actually really reduces your well-being to have a long commute because you don't have control over it. So that's just a side note. But I like the example of that we tend to play out these scenarios in our life, and we're like, well, what if this goes wrong, and then that goes wrong, and then that goes wrong, as opposed to, and what are the benefits you would get out of starting this new job? So I think that's a good insight, and why it's good to choose someone who's different from you to bounce your ideas off of. So sometimes I get annoyed with my husband's top strength of critical thinking because I just want him to agree with me. But it also is a benefit to have, he thinks totally differently than I do. And for him to, say, well, you think that person isn't going to respond to your proposal, but you only sent it 20 minutes ago. How do you know that, they've already said no? So, so maybe you can't coach your spouse, as we know, but there's some ways to nudge the system. Okay, some other insights. I can be negative in thoughts and expressions, but in my actions, I'm the opposite. To believe in yourself is difficult, but essential. So one thing I'll try to do is more of what I'm already doing. Great, Martin, that's right. This is a win. If you leave with nothing but what's going well and how can I do more of it, I think that is a success. Too often we think, all right, what's going wrong and how do I fix it? And the whole point of appreciative inquiry is focusing on what's working and how do we do more of that. One thing to try, unconditional positive question in hiring practice. Nice. So yeah, when you're hiring someone, focusing on how do you get the best of stories out of them, and also asking questions that they're not probably predisposed to will get you a genuine answer as opposed to the ones that they've been practicing of like, what's your biggest weakness? Maybe have a conversation with my partner on when have we been most successful? What can we carry from that into the future? I want to pause there. Thank you, Catherine. This is amazing. I recently had some friends of mine who were like the epitome of the perfect couple, and we just found out they're getting a divorce, and I was really shaken by that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to use appreciative inquiry. When have we been successful? And I literally had this conversation with my husband, and I said, okay, so we're successful when we have time to sleep, when someone watches the kids, when we have time to have a conversation with each other. Not easy to do, but we're successful when he uses humor. We're successful when we are being playful with each other. So I did that very thing that you just suggested, and it definitely flipped my mindset because I tend to be a little more growth mindset with my work and less with my relationship. Another question, the smallest next step with the biggest impact. Because it's easy to think of like the big thing of, well, I'll never eat sugar again, or, I'll just practice for that marathon, or I'm just going to move to Mozambique. The big thing is easy to think of. It's like, what's the nugget? What's the smallest thing? So thank you for sharing those. I want to end with a little video, a little fun, and jot it down on the chat panel if you can't hear this video, but it is about the power of the question. Oh, where'd my video go? Oh, I was gonna talk about Character Strengths Matter, which is a book that I co-edited and wrote with 26 other people, talk about collaborating with strengths. This is what we use to raise money for a scholarship. So if you want to learn more about focusing on strengths, I will also put a link to the survey, which is free, in the chat panel. So here is one of my favorite videos. Whoop. All right, let me move my video. Okay, here we go.
Questions only, take it away.
Wait. All right, I'm back. Okay. Nothing like a little Whoopi Goldberg in the afternoon. So the point of that is that there's a power in the questions we ask, and we tend to think in statements and leading questions. So one of the things I found about found out about the people that I coach is that if they just got better of asking questions, that would invite people. So this new research that Michelle McQuaid and her team have done talk about inviting, and starting with the what or the how questions is really, that's your cue to ask open-ended questions. So thank you so much. I'm going to give you a few minutes of your day back. Thanks so much for being with us today. And let me know if you have any other questions for me. You have my email right here, and I'll type it in the chat panel again. And good luck in focusing on what's working in your ABCDE and in focusing on positive questions. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.